So the final session for day one is going to be a panel discussion on digital innovation process. So it's my great pleasure to welcome with us here on the panel. We have Alex Fosel, who's the lead architect for automation to autonomy at John Deere. We have Erin Spring, who is the director of new ventures at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And Betsy Bowman, who is the LCB Smith Professor in the Liberal Arts and Chair of the Department of Art History, Art and Art Education here at Case Western Reserve University. And our moderator for this panel is Marguerite Johnson, who is the Innovation Leader at Leggett & Platt Automotive. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm good? All right, I'll hold it closer to my mouth so you guys can hear me. So I am excited to be a part of this conference. I'm excited that you all are here to discuss further about the digital innovation process. And each one of our industry experts will introduce themselves along as you'll see their slides as they introduce themselves. And so I'll give them your attention. Okay, so we're going to improvise. Yeah. All right, so we'll start with Alex, and so hopefully Alex, as they start pulling the slides, okay. Okay, as they start putting the slides together, hopefully Betsy, it will show up while you're still talking, okay, and we can move along. There we go.
Oh, good, great. All right, so those are the four of us, and I guess I'll just start. I have slides, but for the second half of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm a traditional art historian in the sense that I have a PhD in art history. I'm actually a Abbas Antonis, which you may or may not know what that means, but it means that I study the continuation of the Roman Empire in the Eastern Mediterranean until 1453. Leaving that aside, I'm here today to talk to you about a fantastic collaboration that I'm involved in with the physics department here at Case Western Reserve University, and also with someone named Adam Lowe, who established something called Factum Arte, which I'll talk to you about in just a minute. So the Physics and Art History Project was born out of love, not something you expect to necessarily hear. It was started by two doctoral students, one Lauren Smith in art history and the other Michael McMaster in physics. And they had a new piece of equipment called an optical profilometer, and they decided to see if it could be used to distinguish artists' brushworks, like a signature, like a handwriting, as it were, but with brushes on canvas. The optical profilometer is a non-invasive scanner, 3D scanner, of surfaces, of whatever kind of surface. It's not a very large piece of equipment, and what we did to get the project going was we commissioned some students from the local art school, the Cleveland Institute of Art, to paint the same flower 3 times with the same canvases, the same brushes, the same pigments. So we had a kind of controlled experiment. We chose the 2 artists whose work was the least like each other's, and we scanned 3 canvases with the optical profilometer. And then the guys who do the amazing machine learning part, and it is men, so I'm saying guys here in an informed way, they fed the machine the first 2 canvases from artist 1 and then the first 2 canvases from artist 2. And then they took the 3rd canvas from each one and they cut it up into teeny little pieces like confetti, digital confetti, and they threw it all together and they fed it into the machine. And I, by the way, was extremely skeptical about this approach because the size of the pieces was far too small in my estimation for there to be anything distinguishing about a brushstroke. Nevertheless, on the first try, the machine got it 91% right. So what this means is that we can use machine learning to identify artists' brushstrokes in cases where paintings are in good enough shape to be representative of the work of the artist. So if we go back 500 years, it may be the case that canvases have been rolled up or they've been conserved a lot, restored, bits have been filled in and repainted. Those may be harder to distinguish, but nevertheless, we're going to be working on an experiment relating to some historical works of art soon. We're going to be publishing a short article on this project very shortly, and our next phase of it involves factum arte. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Adam Lowe, who you saw in the previous image, is a polymath who's been creating amazing things using digital technologies and art for the last 20 plus years in Madrid. He's a Brit. He now controls an entire city block in Madrid. I visited him there. It was simply extraordinary. And Adam is best known for a replica of the tomb of Tutankhamun. You see two of the slides here from that. And the replica, which you see on the lower right, is so precise that they were able to figure out that there's an aberration in the surface of one of the walls. So we're talking about a tomb that's cut into the living rock, right? Not something that's built, but something that's hollowed out. Why would there be an aberration in a wall that looks like a door? Well, it's because it actually is a door, but nobody noticed it before. It was filled in, plastered over, and painted over, and the difference in surface level was so minute that it wasn't discerned by archaeologists. So the question remains, what's behind that wall? The Egyptian government has to decide how to handle that particular question. I'm glad it's not mine to resolve. But at any rate, Adam says that we're in a new world where there's a new person called a digital craftsperson who mediates between the digital and the material. And Adam's replicas are also so good that you can't tell the difference between the original and the copy unless you touch it. And so, in his words, it's no longer about which is original and which is a copy, it's about truth, which changes the playing field altogether in some really interesting ways. So we're going to be taking Adam's scan data and feeding it into our machine and seeing if we can determine the artist's signature brush strokes from some old masters. He's got a massive amount of data at this point. He's currently scanning all of the paintings in the National Gallery in London as just one example. He works around the world. So he's our partner. We're bringing the machine learning to the table, and of course I'm bringing some historical knowledge, and he's bringing the Factum Arte Foundation. So that's my innovative project for today.
Fantastic, Betsy. I will start by introducing a farmer, our customer. They are the ones who actually help feed the world. So before I introduce myself, let's talk a little bit about how they make money. And effectively, what they do is they grow crops in land. And really, there are two ways that they can make money, because typically they sell the product, the grain, at commodity prices. So they can't really work too much on the price side. But they can increase the yield, so per acre produce more, and or they can reduce the costs. Seed, chemicals, weed, chemicals for removing weeds, what I would call medicines for plants, right, that keeps them well healthy. And in the last several hundred years, these customers have made decisions based on their experience, and a few of them with trusted consultants, and also the people who sell them some of these inputs. And they have made these decisions for a complete field, and also for pretty much the complete season. But agriculture is like a factory without a roof, so the weather changes, and also the soil is different, and I'm thinking it's kind of like your canvas. The canvas varies. So what is happening is that the data is enabling our customers to make much more interesting decisions. And that is changing the game. My name is Alex Fessel. I work in John Deere. I have responsibility for the next generation of architectures that are going to enable these customers to continuously automate and eventually get to robotics in these fields. And before I get to Erin, I would like to also say that there are a few key elements that maybe I will bring later in the conversation. One of them is precision ag equipment. So once you know that you need to apply something with precision, you need to have the equipment so that actually happens to that particular land area. We also need precision ag technology that is able to bring the computing, get the data, and control that precision equipment. But also, nothing will happen if we don't have a very reliable network of our dealers, our channel, that not only sell, but actually they take care of the equipment and they keep it running all the time. And they also optimize it. But here's the piece that is new, and that is the connected software solutions. In some of the talks today, we have heard the concept of a platform, and by having a data platform that is gathering all this data that is coming from the land, from weather, from satellite images, etc., we are enabling a significantly more precise and timely way to make decisions. And that's going to continue increasing the production of food so we keep ourselves well-fed and healthy. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Very fascinating and looking forward to learning a bit more. I'm Erin Spring. I lead a team called New Ventures at Goodyear, and thank you. And, you know, as I think what we've been hearing throughout the day is really the industries across the board are changing with digital. So many of you probably know Goodyear. If you don't, you know, we make tires and provide tires and maybe where the rubber literally hits the road across several different applications. Yeah, so, you know, I have lots of tire jokes. If you ask some of our colleagues, we can do that later. You've probably not thought of them much before. But, you know, it's really happening in our industry, and if you know anything about automotive, is it's really undergoing quite a drastic change over about the last 10 years or so, really developing and really progressing, and our industry is really going through this inflection point. And so you've probably seen this before if you're in automotive or if you touch automotive, but there's 4 major trends that as they combine, they're really disrupting our industry. So not only have our individual consumers changing drastically around what they expect when they interact with our product, when they interact with our company, we also have the emergence of a lot of new players that are really saying, you know, mobility was great for the last over 100 plus years, but we want to get out and solve, you know, the intrinsic problems with it, with respect to, you know, how much time people are spending in traffic. I'm sure some of you spent some time in traffic getting here today. And I say I came up from Akron to Cleveland, not as bad, right, as other places in the world. So solving those problems with congestion, solving problems with overall safety, and, you know, solving problems with looking at how sustainable this mobility system is going to be. So we really see this trend from, you know, individual consumers, you know, going from, you know, having access to a vehicle, more and more autonomy, and it's happening now. You know, how does that change as we go forward? All being driven and enabled by connectivity and electrification of our fleet. So my team really is out there looking and saying, you know, the future is already happening today. How do we get out and we learn and build solutions with those future forward customers so that we're positioning Goodyear to solve the needs of those future customers? So that's a lot of what our team is out doing today. You know, a little bit about the team. You know, we're very much positioned where we have several hubs across globally where we try to get embedded with these mobility ecosystems. And sometimes we say, you know, kind of in a safe way, get out and play with traffic or play in traffic. So we have a team out in San Francisco where a lot of the mobility and the technology and the new business models are happening. We have an innovation lab here in Akron as well as in Luxembourg, connected to our core business and working on some new digital solutions around our core business, as well as an innovation lab in Shanghai, really connecting with leaders in that ecosystem. So finally, I'll just put this out here. We can talk about it more later as we think about innovation process. think about kind of getting out and playing in traffic. And, one of the things that we do a lot is how do we get out fast and early, maybe with a hunch on where we think we can create value, and how do we quickly demonstrate that value in market. So this is a place where we piloted. We found that our solution was able to prevent or help this emerging fleet reduce downtime significantly. And I would say there was some digital aspects of it, but we said, first we really proved there's a lot of value here for these emerging customers. How do we take this and now really automate and build that digital platform behind it to do this efficiently and be able to scale? And so that's a little peek into how do we operate. So Marguerite, I'll turn it over to you to maybe start with some questions.
Yeah, thanks.
So thank you.
Oh, sorry, I need to use this. Thank you all very much for your introductions and sharing your slides. Each one of you come from a different industry and a different perspective, so I really appreciate that. This is going to make this conversation about digital innovation processes very enriched, coming from an enabler of farmers, an enabler of artists, an enabler of mobility. So with that being said, and that's the start of our conversation, I'm going to ask you questions that I pre-wrote, so I hope it's not too bad. And then I will open it up for the last 20 minutes for the audience to ask anything that either hasn't been asked here or I haven't addressed in my cards here. So with that, coming from the farmer viewpoint, the driver and the designer or the artist, how are your digital innovation processes enabled as a mission critical to the objective that you have in the farming community and enriching the soil? And again, I will bring it to you, Betsy, and then lastly to you, Erin. So how are your digital innovation processes mission critical to your endeavors?
Well, I think that it's clear that if we are not helping our customers get that yield, we become irrelevant. So to me, it's mission critical in the sense that for sustainability of our partnership with our customers, we need to continue being able to enable them to have this higher yield and reduce the costs. And today, the way to do that, a key element is really measure to understand where are the opportunities to improve the yield. And growing biological things, and I'm thinking of crops here, is something that is a complex system, right? So the availability of data, and moreover, the availability of connecting that data with the ability to do analytics and make sense of that data, get insights that are actionable, we need to be at the forefront of enabling that for our customers. So it's mission critical, certainly.
Well, of course, our project couldn't exist without the digital, but I want to say something about the value of the digital for works of art. The National Gallery in London is probably having Adam Lowe scan all of their works of art so that they have a precise conditions assessment of the works as they exist in the current moment. If those works are somehow damaged, as all works of art end up being over centuries, then there'll be a record that people in the future can consult to help them figure out what was there, what was lost. So that's a very crucial part of the digital. But of course, the machine learning is central to the project of identifying artists' signatures, and we couldn't do the project without it.
Sorry, could I come in real quick?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep, it's just, you just thought, created this thought. When you say track the history of pieces of art and their conservation, there's a parallel with soil. Soil must be one of the most precious things we have. And if we do not conserve them in the sense that they have this biodiversity that make them really rich for planting and growing a variety of plants, we may end with desertification, for example. So tracking that sustainability and conservation is similar to what we do with the soil. I find that there's an interesting parallel there.
Fascinating. Thank you.
All right, I'll have to think about how to connect tires to the soil, but I'll come back to that. But I think that's what...
But they're usually connected, right?
They are. But I mean, that's what we were actually talking about before as we got started. You know, we're coming from this at different angles, but you always find similar analogous threads between us. And thank you. We'll just keep it rolling. And we know we're keeping you from the happy hour, so sorry.
We should have brought the cocktails before.
Yeah, back to the original question, if I remember. I think the digital aspect for us is mission critical. If you go back to those trends that I put up there, I mean, those automotive is changing because of these digital at the core disruptors. And so we have this whole new set of customers who are digital natives. And, we're now saying, all right, how do we make sure that we work with them and that we're easy to do business with them and we meet the expectations that they have? And I would say if you think about automotive, it's been around for a long time, had a lot of great innovations over time, but more mechanical innovations. Now we have these digital innovations, and ultimately, how do we make sure that we remain relevant in that, and make sure that we're adding value to these new kind of what I would like to say digital native companies that are really, really growing quickly, and have an expectation that you're going to deliver on the same type of digital experiences that they're providing for their end consumers.
Can I make a comment on that before going on? Thanks. So as far as remaining relevant, I think that's something that's really important to me too, as an academic and a teacher. And I think that digital projects that span disciplines really excite younger students who aren't thinking in the same kind of categories that we were thinking of in the 20th century, and it's a way to keep fields like art history relevant for younger generations, which I think is super important.
So keeping in mind that farming is as old as the earth and mobility is as old as the horse and buggy, or I guess I would say the original horse, then the buggy, and of course art, coming from the viewpoint of all of your established areas of expertise are very well known, right? So there's a history behind it, there's expectations behind it. How do you digitally enable something that everyone thinks they're familiar with?
I would say it starts with the data. It starts with measuring. It starts with really not only sensing, but also gathering and aggregating that sensing into a database that you can actually start using. And I was thinking about that in the sense of digital innovation process. What data enables you to do is also to iterate much more quickly, in the sense that you can look at the data again, and maybe cross-correlate that with something else, etc. I was just thinking of tires, and I'm not making this up right now because I have worked in a project related to how can we work with your tires and have sensors in them so they can actually estimate one of the most important properties of soil, which is the compaction. So when the tires have the sensors, we know how much the soil is compacted, and we can recommend certain practices to the tillage practices, for example. So that is an example. And I think that is all about getting enough data so you can start digging into it, trying to get some initial insights, and then that is going to start leading you the way into where the value is.
Right, so for you, digital is helping to inform a different viewpoint and actually speeding the testing of that viewpoint to ensure that it's progressing your objective, which is to innovate in the aspects of farming.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think we'll have to follow up on that last piece, but I think, sometimes when you're not measuring something, then you don't really exactly know what's happening. So I think, getting out there and starting to, measure how your product's performing, for example, put some more data in the hands of your customers and understand how they either respond to that data, you really learn very, very quickly. So there's one thing where you can kind of sit in a conference room, have a great ideation session about all these great ideas, versus you put, something in the hands of your customers and you find out these unexpected results that you never would have thought of in the conference room. So, we have examples where, we are, let's say, monitoring our product using sensors on it, and we thought we were providing one piece of value, and our customers loving it, right? And then we dig into how they're using the data, and we find out they're not actually monitoring their tires at all, which is, of course, what we were offering. They're monitoring the brakes from the data they're getting from the tires. So it's really, I think, important to, first you got to measure things to learn, and then having that constant customer feedback on how are they really using it. Of course, we'd all like them to be, thinking more and more about tires, but that's not always the case. But there's other value you can learn by getting out, doing, measuring, collecting that data, and really digging into it.
So you were able to enable an entire new user experience just by talking to your customers about how they were using the data. You had one intention with the use of the data, and they informed a different experience with using the data. So do either one of our panelists have anything to build on how you basically moved your data in a new direction and created a new user experience that maybe was unintentional?
So I have a thought here. So, we jump right into data, but actually what Erin is bringing is the understanding that we need to really have hypotheses in what is the workflow of our customers. What are the decisions they're making? What are the choices they have? What is really pain points? And even if you don't know very well, but at least you can have a hypothesis of something that you can improve. Just get a data set that may improve. But as Erin is doing, many a times you find that your hypothesis was wrong, and you found some other way to add value.
Yeah, I would say most of the time, I have some team members here, maybe we find our hypotheses were wrong, but I think that's why we're doing the work that we're doing. And I'm sure all the time we set out to maybe go after one type of solution, but it goes back to how do you follow the customer experience? How do you follow the data? And, put some rigor around it too, so you can be, intellectually honest with what you're finding.
So with the expanded definition of product, I think that's where we are at this point. You move from product to service to user experience to platform experience. So, digital has enabled us to broaden the definition of product to a whole product. What new opportunities have opened up in your industry, because now you can look at product through a digital lens and create a whole product?
In the field of art history, there's a host of things that have opened up. The optical profilometry project is just one of 5 discrete projects that we've now come up with in consultation with the physics department and my wonderful colleagues there, Ken Singer and Ina Ross, and also with conservators at the Cleveland Museum of Art, Dean Yoder, and a couple of his other colleagues are also involved. And what we're able to do is, I think we're at a point where we're going to be able to do some things that haven't been done before for art. So the optical profilometry project is a great example of bringing new technologies to bear on traditional kinds of art historical questions, like who painted this? The next time someone brings out 5 Jackson Pollocks from their attic and says these are Jackson Pollocks, there's not going to be much debate if we are able to use this technology to determine the outcome of that. So that's going to actually considerably move the needle in auction houses, and the art market is one of the.
So you're disrupting eBay, basically.
I don't know how many Pollocks are for sale on eBay, but also one of the things I'm hoping to do is use image recognition software as it becomes increasingly sophisticated, and scan works of art, and then get to the point where we can ask some big data questions of paintings, for example, which we have not been able to do at all before, and I don't know if anyone's even thought about it.
I think that Betsy is bringing something that maybe is really underlying a key element or a key consequence or an enabler that digitalization brings, which is the question of trustworthiness. I think that is what you're saying. It's just you're bringing significantly more accuracy or certainty in terms of establishing trustworthiness. And I think that is something that goes through every business. In ours, it could be the traceability to the type of food that you want to choose. And you want to have the assurance that that food actually was grown in a particular way that you prefer, right? So I think that this is something that more and more the digitalization is becoming as an enabler. And I think that this trustworthiness translates to value directly.
So with that, Erin, if I can elaborate a little bit on your trustworthiness and the digital sophistication that comes with the ability to authenticate and to trace. When we look at the FACE trends that you put up earlier about autonomy and fleet and ride sharing and electrification, these are all they're new and exploratory, and when we combine them all at once, so a robot taxi in a fleet environment that's autonomously driven, that's electric, right? Mm-hmm. So when we combine that layering of technologies and create something new, I mean, are you thinking more about how the user experience will change in interacting with the tire in that environment, and how trustworthiness on behalf of having a brand such as Goodyear behind your fleet of autonomous vehicles can enable that digital model?
Yeah, certainly. And I think, no one, we all have hypotheses on how it's going to come together. There's some models already out in the market, but that's exactly what we're trying to look at and project to and start building. I think when I completely agree with you around the trustworthiness, I think sometimes we think about it just from a level of transparency that digital is able to provide throughout the customer experience. From how from the tire product itself, what is the state of the product, making sure that the tires are ready to go, the vehicle is ready to go, and being able to, predict when it needs to be scheduled, but not only say, all right, you need to go schedule something, but then automatically do the scheduling for them and provide transparency on when the work is going to be done. And there's transparency and almost intimacy that you're able to do with your customers with respect to, as platforms speak to each other, you should be able to check that vehicle out from the mobility provider's platform. Nobody else should be renting it while you're doing service on it. And that's what creates this seamless experience and ultimately provides the transparency to the fleet operator and hopefully, to the end rider instead of the driver. So a lot of work to be done to get there, but starting along, what are those enabling technologies to deliver that ultimate customer experience?
Just a quick comment, right? So the same way that we recognize that digitalization and data is enabling the trustworthiness, at the same time, all this connectivity opens a number of risks, right? So the aspects of cybersecurity and making sure that the machines actually are responding to the authorized inputs, right, is a key thing to consider also. I'm thinking of other dimensions that are very relevant.
So in an innovation process, and you have to consider not only your immediate environment that you can control, but now you bring into the factor that you have to consider other inputs or stakeholders and unintentional things that happen. And this is not one of the questions that I have on my list, but I'm just thinking about this right now dynamically. How do you, how do you get to a point where your digital innovation process can flex, can absorb some of these outside forces, unknown impacts that you definitely don't have visibility to when you're designing that innovation process? So can I just bring it down one more level? You're talking to your distributors, you're talking to your farmers, you have a good instinct about what your digital innovation process looks like with those players. And then you factor in the possibility of maybe a unique pest, right, or an environmental factor that maybe you didn't account for. So how do you flex your innovation process so that you can account for some of those unknowns or dynamically changing environments that could impact the known?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to quote a colleague of mine, Mark Moran. He works in one of our John Deere Technology Innovation Centers. He said, we don't practice agile, we are agile. And what I wanted to say about that in our innovation process as it relates to digital is that there are two things that are going to be truth in innovating in a digital world. One is that you don't know everything. You don't know the requirements up front. You will be discovering things. And the other one is that as soon as you develop a solution, you put it in the hands of customers, and the customer is going to change his practices around that technology to make it work. So whatever you learn in the past is going to change. I think that the way to make our innovation processes robust is to really strive to stay agile and to be able to take these new inputs and keep iterating around the value proposition for that customer.
I think some of the obstacles that we're going to run into with these new technologies, pardon me, is hostility from people who are afraid of change, who like holding on to the value of their original works of art. I was recently talking to a colleague who is doing really, really super high quality scans of medieval manuscripts, and he said that he made a copy of one important page from a manuscript, and he gave it, intending it as a gift to the owners of the manuscript, and they were a public entity, by the way, and they flipped out and they told him to destroy it. So instead of seeing the potential of replication and to enable people to share works of art, I think that there's going to be a certain amount of opposition from conservative members of the art world. And also I would say art historians, many of us are trained in connoisseurship, which is to say the attribution of works of art using our decades of skill of looking at works of art. And I consider myself to be someone who's very good at this also. And I think that people who've spent their entire lives, and perhaps even their jobs, I mean, as a faculty member, I don't actually live on being able to identify an artist's work. But there are art historians who do. I imagine that they're going to feel threatened by this. I don't know about, I mean, I think that we are being pretty agile at the moment as far as taking advantage of 21st century technologies. I'm not sure how we're going to end up working through any opposition that we encounter.
Yeah, so when I think about, how do we provide some flex, right, as we think about, being agile, I think it comes back to, what is the market telling you? And how do you make sure that if you come across something that's unknown, you use it as a learning, and you say, how much of a priority is this for my customer? And then ultimately tells me how much it needs to be a priority. So I think, first side note, as much as you can have an early customer to learn with is really important. So, kind of resetting your priorities based on some unknown, what is that priority to the customer? And then I think most importantly, we were talking about trustworthiness and transparency. I think that comes back to the organization where we say, hey, we learned X, Y, Z, and it was completely unexpected, but it's a very big priority. And this is how we're going to reprioritize things. And, the team is all in agreement. Which means we're going to put, maybe something comes out later. But I think being able to be as open and transparent on, hey, this is what we learned. Thank goodness, hopefully you learn it early versus much later, and you adjust and you go forward.
So with that, thank you guys for answering my questions. So now I would like to open it up for the audience to ask questions, and there's a mic here.
So, Erin, have a question. The way we were talking about the case study for Michelin, so as part of Goodyear, how exactly your organization is aligned with regard to maybe the CI organization?
So how we're organized right now is I report to our chief technology officer. And so we are part of our research and development team, and we work very closely with each of our business units in a partnership to drive solutions forward.
Sure, thank you.
Great, I get.
Oh, okay. I was just going to pick up on the theme that you were talking about. I just made the note, there's a difference, I think, between opposition to change or opposition to disruption. You talk about like art historians. I mean, in some ways, their role is being disrupted by being able to replicate and then provide those art pieces, for other viewership. And so I would imagine you're going to get a fair amount of resistance to change when there are individuals that are being disrupted. I just wondered, maybe it's a comment or a question, to what extent can the panel talk to, navigating that difference between changing the business to really disrupting either the client or the end user? That, and digitalization is certainly certain aspects of it. This is like security of jobs, at its most basic form.
Well, thank you for that. That gives me something to think about. I think that I'm going to refer back to the previous speaker earlier this afternoon and talk about getting people excited about the technology and the potential instead of just seeing it as a threat. One of the things that Adam Lowe has done and is in the process of doing actually right now is he's replicated 2 enormous statues of ancient Near Eastern guardian deities. He scanned examples that are in the British Museum that were brought there in the probably early 19th century. And he's recreated them, and he has now shipped them from Madrid to Iraq, and they're going to be put in locations where the so-called Islamic State destroyed other examples of these ancient Near Eastern deity figures. So that kind of intervention in cultural heritage and in the attempt by the so-called Islamic State to erase culture is, I think, something that excites a lot of people.
Let me make a comment related to this idea of disrupting, especially when it's the customer. One thing that is critical for us is that we can advance quite a bit in the technology, but deploying that technology, first of all, we need to have a channel that is able to sell and support. But our customers, they have their own journey. So the way that they can adopt technology and change is, especially in agriculture, you can't change too much in a year because your cycles are yearly cycles of production. So that already, as much as we want to say we're agile, there are some key things of nature that prevent you from going too fast. But then also, I would say that our customers in general are very traditional, very conservative. So show me, kind of like, show me the value, and then I'm going to start migrating my practices. Now, this varies by market. Maybe in the US we are more conservative. In other markets we see significantly faster adoption of technology.
Yeah, I would make the same comment. I think very similar customer base with respect to if you have the opportunity to show them the value, work with them to implement the value. I think, also I've mentioned before, as you think about who are some of your lead customers that are more likely to adopt and incorporate some of your solutions and work through it together, which then helps you, once that's working well, provide it as a reference to maybe some customers who want some more maybe justification of the value of the change that's required.
So now I'm going to speak from my side, not necessarily. Can I follow up on the comment? All of these industries have crossed the chasm. How many of you are familiar with that term, chasm crossing? Okay, so they've crossed the chasm already. They have to do it again. So they have to find those technology experts, those innovators. They have to find those strategic folks. They have to get to that early adoption, early market all over again. And that is an aspect of newness for an established pipeline traditional manufacturing company that is quite different and unique. We are not used to being those people who have to chasm cross. And now we have to do that. And so the disruption that is innate in digital for those native companies, that capability is so new to us. And I see that lack of experience of chasm crossing being kind of a hidden threat or hidden disruptor. I forget the word that you used, a force against you. I apologize. But something that's holding us back. Similar to the authentication of art or the replication of art, and someone feeling like they've been devalued because now their artism or their artistic talents can be printed or duplicated. But I feel like the threat to manufacturers is now we have already crossed the chasm, and now we have to do it all over again, and that is hard.
Thank you, guys. Off again. Oh, there you go. I have a question about the data, especially maybe in farming. So the machines passing over the fields and all the data that are generated for the farmer, for the seed company, for the seed treatment company, for everybody. I think that's really, for me, where there's a lot of innovation potential lying. Can you talk a little bit how all these companies that are very focused on having a competitive edge are working together on sharing the data and keeping their innovative edge as well?
A very good question, because once again, when we consider agriculture, we are starting to say that there was this saying that data was kind of like the exhaust, and no, it's really the fuel for decisions, the fuel for improvement. John Deere states that the data belongs to the grower. Let's start with that. So when we want to upload that data to our platform, digital platform, we would like to get consent, explicit consent. There are some other uses of that data that are anonymized, that are used for product improvement, for example. But going back to your question, I think that there's like in any industry that is evolving rapidly, you have two forces. A force that is trying to grow your share of the data that is available, because that really enables you to do a number of things to improve your customers' profitability. But also, our customers are not exclusive to us. As you all said, they're also customers of a seed company, chemical company, etc. So there are several initiatives in the industries, I would say in different geographies, that are looking for the interoperability of digital platforms. And of course, some of the challenges is data, using the same data vocabulary or definition, data quality, and also be respectful of each other's commitments of who owns the data and how the data can be used. But I would say that in general, in ag, we're seeing several initiatives that are making good progress in terms of enabling this cross-operation, interoperability, and sharing of data so that our customers can benefit. We are even working with some of our most loved competitors.
Well, okay, can you hear me? Somehow similar question, but a little bit different way. You deal with the innovation process, which is unique. There are always opportunities for getting to maybe intellectual property, which could be joined, could be yours. I just wanted to know if you have some kind of a recognition process that you are having on your horizon when you are dealing with these initiatives. If you look at that from an IP perspective and IP perspective protection, and how would you deal if you do that? And I would like to know how do you do it, and then if you have partners, how do you deal with the partners that you are not infringing maybe on their IP?
So, for all of us? Yep. Okay. So that really is a question of what is the IP processes that we have. So in all of the product technology development and product delivery, we have steps and activities that actually engage engineers or designers with the IP lawyers, and we look for capturing of invention disclosures. Whenever we have a work with other companies, we always look to make sure that there is single ownership of the intellectual property, and sometimes we establish, free licenses for our partner. So, but that is really following the more traditional IP, and we do that as much in data as much as what we do with the traditional product development.
So one of the founding principles of Factum Arte is to share technology, share expertise, and also make sure that the people who own the works of art keep control of the data. So he's been working for many years in Egypt. He now has a completely Egyptian expert team that's able to use his equipment and communicate with the Madrid office remotely when they run into trouble. So this is a kind of anti-colonial move on his part to erase the history of colonialism, where people hang on to knowledge and technology and don't share it. This colonialism may not seem like a really relevant issue to many of you in this room, but I can tell you it's a very live issue with the Egyptian population, and I'm sure many others around the world. The history of colonialism is very present for them, and they're, as you may know from the news, some key figures like Zahi Hawass, the former Minister of Antiquities in Egypt, is calling for things to be returned to Egypt that were legally taken out of the country. So there's a lot of anxiety about ownership, and I think that the way that Factum Arte is handling it is really the way to go.
I think that Betsy's answer was so much more interesting than mine.
I think I'll sum it up. And both of you are asking, there's a lot of anxiety around ownership in general. So I think it's something that many across the board people are trying to work through. And in Alex and my type of role, trying to figure that out with partners, because you're trying to retain that value and retain your unique IP in a world where oftentimes you're combining knowledge to really create what your customers are looking for. So I think it's something that we're constantly working through. The one thing I would share is, as you work in this area, it's never a one-size-fits-all solution. It's very different when you're piloting and learning with someone versus as you look to take something to market and scale. So don't let a 2-year legal process slow you down from learning would be my number one message.
There's
but still, Betsy's was much more interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll start to wrap things up here with just one last question. So as you think about the actual innovation process itself, perhaps you could just spend a couple of minutes and talk about how digital is actually impacting innovation. Clearly, we've heard the impact that data is having on the innovation process, but I'm wondering, are you doing anything else with other digital technologies such as social media mining or crowdsourcing or innovation challenges or whatever you might be doing that, other aspects of digital that are impacting the innovation process?
Ladies?
I thought you were just asking me to plug our upcoming innovation challenge at Case Western. So I thought I would do that coming in November, where we're trying to really, source ideas from young talent and bring them together in a hackathon type of experience. I'd say that's one area. So if you're interested, take a look online for the Goodyear Innovation Challenge with Case Western. I couldn't help myself.
I'll take the beer later. That's
okay. So thank you for that. But I think, there's a lot of different ways, I think, from the innovation process to get ideas and to get information, being able to quickly vet out ideas through online forums and online platforms is one of them. You can go from, 6 months of research and do that in a matter of weeks if you have the right online community set up. So I'd say that's one approach that we're using. I would ultimately say that, any innovation, at least in my mind, really just starts out, out in the dirt a bit. I'll take it back to the soil, and really understanding, what are those day-to-day problems that your customers are having? How do you build that insights? And then almost validate it by some online forums, online tools, etc.
Yeah, I need to think more about how to engage people. Our project just got really going last January, so it's been a really quick timeline, and we've gotten some amazing results. But one thing we did do last year when the Cleveland Museum of Art made the very bold step to make their photographs of their collection open access, so they provided high-quality copies of high-quality photographs online, along with metadata. Some other museums, like the Metropolitan, have attempted to do this, but they've done it with uneven quality images. The Cleveland Museum of Art was very clear that they were doing this with high-quality images only, and they're now working on some 3D scans of things that they're going to also post online. So this is a way of making this museum, in case you don't know it, by the way, it's free for all the people forever. And so this is a way of taking that into the 21st century. But we were asked at CASE to activate the open access event. And one of the things we did that you made me think about when you mentioned the hackathon is we created a competition for a digital collage in collaboration with the Kelvin Smith Library here at CASE. And we offered prizes, the greatest one of which was $1,000. So not negligible for undergraduates or graduate students. And we got some absolutely fantastic collages. I mean, I was part of the judging team, and it was just amazing. But I need to think more about how to address audiences. That's something that you all think about a lot. As a professor, I think about engaging with students, but I don't really think about the bigger audiences like the rest of you do. So this is very stimulating for me. Thank you.
Steve, the answer is scale. In the past, we could have one or two or three or a few partners or coming in to work and improve what a farm could do in terms of improving the profitability. Today, when we have more than 100 million acres of data in the operations center of John Deere, in our platform, we can have as many partners to come in, look at the data, and understand what our farmers could be doing better. So there are more than 100 companies or organizations that are connected to this digital platform. I think that is maybe the most important answer to your question, is the scale of the collaboration and the ability to bring more smart people to come in and make agriculture better.
Okay, Marguerite wants to go.
So I didn't get an opportunity to share with you guys the company that I come from. So Ligon & Platt started off as the innovators of the coil spring and the mattress. So many of you probably, and parents, slept on the original Ligon & Platt coil spring. We've evolved to the sleep number bed, so the smart bed that helps you, not sweat, sleep upright or articulate or however you would like to sleep. And so one of our capabilities were taking the knowledge and the information from the bedding space and that comfort understanding and that internal data that we had from beds and transferring that into automobiles. So sometimes you can take your data points from the outside, and sometimes you can take them from the inside.
Sounds scary, sleeping at the wheel. Is there? All right, so please join me in thanking Erin, Betsy, Alex, and Marguerite for a fascinating panel discussion.